What happens when one of Hollywood's most fearless spirits, a man whose very presence seems to vibrate with energy, pride, and uncompromising authenticity, is pushed just a little too far on live television? That question became reality on a recent episode of The View. The cameras were rolling, capturing every flicker of movement, every subtle shift in facial expression, as the audience buzzed with anticipation. Jason Momoa, the larger-than-life star known for his thunderous laugh, untamed charisma, and imposing presence, suddenly found himself in a corner he hadn't anticipated. A corner that didn't feel like the playful banter he usually navigated with ease, but a space loaded with scrutiny and the unspoken expectation of careful answers. Before diving deeper into this explosive moment, it's worth noting why the world watches Jason Momoa. He isn't merely a movie star, he's a force of nature, a man who can make the air feel alive simply by entering a room. His walk, casual yet commanding, exudes confidence. His hair, long and wild, cascades over his shoulders like a mane. The leather bracelets on his wrists jingle softly with every motion, each sound punctuating his presence. He's the embodiment of vitality, a man whose laughter rolls through a room like distant thunder, leaving a trail of warmth and admiration in its wake. That day began as any other episode. The studio lights glimmered over the familiar round table, casting a golden hue that made the polished surface shine. The hosts engaged in their typical crosstalk, laughing at each other's small jokes, the audience gradually settling into expectant applause. Jason strode in with that signature swagger, boots hitting the stage with a soft, almost musical thud, and the crowd erupted. Cameras zoomed in on his smile, broad, easy, familiar. It was the kind of smile that made viewers feel like they were meeting an old friend, not just watching a man on a screen. Sunny Host, ever the warm and practiced professional, leaned forward with her welcoming charm. "Jason, it's great to have you here. You've been busy, between Aquaman 2 and your environmental advocacy. You're everywhere right now." Jason chuckled, the sound filling the studio like a low, rolling wave. "Yeah," he said, eyes sparkling with genuine sincerity. "Trying to do my part for the planet, you know. Got to leave it better for my kids than how we found it." The audience responded with appreciative applause. His words landed with authenticity, as they always did, the kind of message that reinforced the image of Jason, not just as an actor, but as a man who genuinely carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. But beneath the surface, subtle signs indicated that today would not be a simple feel-good exchange. There was a tension in the air, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Sunny adjusted slightly in her chair, her tone softening, but carrying an undercurrent of challenge. "Speaking of the environment," she said carefully, "some critics have pointed out that while you advocate for sustainability, you still fly private jets to film sets and events. Isn't that a bit contradictory?" The studio seemed to freeze for a fraction of a second. Even Whoopi's expression flickered subtly in the background, a silent acknowledgement of a tone she recognized immediately. Jason's signature smile faltered just slightly. His jaw tightened, and his gaze flickered between Sunny and the audience. For a heartbeat, the usual ease that accompanied him on set seemed to dissolve. He began slowly, deliberately, "That's fair. I'm not perfect, but I try to offset it. I invest in clean energy wherever I can." His voice remained calm, yet there was a weight behind it, an undercurrent of intensity that suggested this wasn't just a rehearsed response. "It's not as black and white as it might seem," he added, his eyes locking with Sunny's, almost pleading for understanding beneath the spotlight glare. Sunny nodded slightly, polite yet firm, her own intensity rising subtly. "But do you think it sends the wrong message to fans? People see you talking about saving the ocean, planting trees, protecting endangered species, and then they see you boarding private jets. Doesn't that undermine the message you're trying to convey?" A few murmurs rippled through the audience. The tension was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, humming beneath the bright studio lights, a low current of unease threading through every camera angle, every microphone. Jason leaned forward, his voice dropping, measured but carrying a quiet force that demanded attention. "Sunny, I think if you're going to talk about hypocrisy," he said evenly, "we could look around this whole table and find it. Every single one of us has compromises. I'm doing what I can with the platform I've got. You think I don't feel the weight of it every single day." The subtlety of his response, a calm deflection underlined with moral conviction, was almost theatrical. Whoopi turned slightly, eyes darting between the two, ready to interject, aware that the exchange had moved into territory beyond normal guest banter. The audience, meanwhile, leaned forward in their seats, sensing the tension crackling like static electricity. Jason's presence commanded the room. He wasn't defensive in the usual celebrity way, deflecting with humor or charm. He was measured, forceful, authentic. He embodied the paradox of a man at once gentle and untamed, the kind of person who could make an entire room feel both at ease and on edge at the same time. Each word was deliberate, each pause calculated not for effect, but to ensure the truth of his perspective landed fully in the minds of everyone present. As Sunny considered her next move, the subtle shift was apparent. The light chatter that had accompanied the show's opening minutes vanished. Cameras captured the taut lines in Jason's face, the slight furrow of concentration, the sparkle of conviction in his eyes. He was more than a celebrity in that moment. He was an ideal, a symbol of someone grappling with contradiction, someone unwilling to allow moral questioning to be reduced to sound bites or platitudes. For a moment it felt as though time itself slowed in the studio. The audience collectively held its breath. This wasn't just another interview, another promotion. This was confrontation. This was accountability in its rawest, most compelling form. And Jason Momoa, the actor, the advocate, the living force of nature, was meeting it head-on, neither retreating nor overcompensating. The cameras rolled, capturing every nuance, every flicker of emotion, every subtle inflection in his voice. And for those watching at home, the image on the screen was magnetic, impossible to look away from. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a lesson in presence, conviction, and how a person can wield authenticity in the face of criticism. By the time the segment reached its next beat, it was clear to everyone in the studio that this wasn't the Jason Momoa people were used to seeing. This was someone more, someone alive with moral certainty, someone unafraid to push back without losing grace. And for those brief, unforgettable minutes on live television, the line between celebrity and human being blurred beautifully, leaving a mark that viewers would not soon forget. Even as the initial volley of questions settled into the charged silence of the studio, Jason Momoa wasn't done. The room, still thick with anticipation and the faint hum of cameras, felt heavier now, as if every beam of light was magnifying the tension. He leaned slightly forward, eyes locking on Sunny Host, his expression calm yet cutting with quiet intensity. "You see a clip, a photo, and you think you've got the full story," he said, his tone sharpening just enough to ripple through the studio air. "But you don't see the work behind the scenes. You don't see the teams actually funding the cleanup efforts, doing the hard work, taking the risks and making it happen. That's what I'm focused on, not some Instagram post about how I travel from one set to the next." The camera lingered on him for a beat. His voice was measured, almost soft, but every word carried the weight of someone who had been misunderstood too often, someone who had to defend not just actions, but intent. Jason had the rare ability to make a simple explanation feel monumental. It wasn't just an answer, it was an assertion of his truth. Sunny smiled thinly, her lips pressed in a polite, controlled curve that revealed nothing, her eyes glimmering with practiced calm. "Jason, I think people just want consistency. That's all," she said evenly, her voice low but firm, like a scalpel cutting into the tension. Jason's lips curled in a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. The studio, already on edge, felt the shift immediately. The laughter from the audience faltered, uncertain. He leaned back slightly in his chair, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of the room sink into him before responding. "Consistency, huh?" he said quietly, almost rhetorically. "So I should stop making movies too. Stop doing my job entirely. You think that helps the planet?" His gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on each host, each audience member, letting the question linger. The silence deepened. Even the audience's sporadic laughter, once warm and rhythmic, now sounded hesitant, strained under the gravity of the exchange. Jason leaned forward again, elbows resting on the table, voice calm yet carrying a subtle steel beneath the words. You know, Sunny, I've done interviews all over the world. People ask tough questions, questions I respect. I don't shy away from accountability, but this. He gestured vaguely at the round table, at the studio's golden lights reflecting across polished surfaces. This feels different. Something's off. This isn't just a question. It feels like a setup. Sunny tilted her head slightly, her posture straightening. What do you mean? She asked, curiosity laced with caution, her tone carefully neutral. Jason's gaze dropped for a moment, as though he were collecting the right words in the stillness of his mind. Then, meeting her eyes again, he spoke with measured clarity. Feels like a gotcha moment, like you came here not to hear me, but to make me look like a hypocrite, and maybe, just maybe, to make it entertaining for the audience. I didn't come here to defend my life choices. I came to talk about something that actually matters. A ripple of applause started in the audience, tentative at first, unsure whether they were responding to his words, his passion, or the sheer weight of the tension in the room. Whoopi Goldberg nodded slowly, her expression softening, sensing the shift in atmosphere, and understanding that the conversation had moved beyond simple critique into something more human, more real. Jason's voice softened slightly, but the intensity remained, quiet but inexorable. I get it, he said, looking directly at Whoopi. I get that people want to hold celebrities accountable. That's fair, that's right, but maybe, just maybe, start holding the industries accountable. The corporations, the systems, the structures that actually impact the planet. Not the one guy trying to make a difference while still doing his job. You think I don't feel it? You think I don't weigh every decision I make, every choice? The applause grew louder this time, raw and spontaneous, the sound echoing off the studio walls, spilling over into the audience like a wave. Even a few of the hosts, who had been trained to maintain a certain polished detachment, looked momentarily surprised, struck by the clarity and truth in his words. The energy in the room shifted. For a fleeting moment, the conversation became less about performance, less about optics, and more about sincerity, about principle, about someone standing firmly in their truth. Sunny, maintaining her professionalism, smiled again. That thin, measured smile that suggested the conversation was far from over. Fair enough, she said lightly, her tone carefully balancing respect with persistence. But you have to admit, Jason, perception matters. People see these things online, in headlines, and they form opinions based on snippets, not the full story. Jason's eyes narrowed slightly, locking on hers with a gaze that was almost tangible in its intensity. It could slice through steel, a quiet power radiating from every movement of his body. Perception isn't truth, he said firmly, each word deliberate. Truth doesn't always fit in a headline, and no matter how loud or clever you make the soundbite, it doesn't change the reality behind it. The work, the effort, the actual impact, that's what matters. The audience erupted again, louder this time, a mixture of applause, gasps, and murmurs. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated. Cameras panned slowly across the studio, capturing every reaction. The stunned expressions, the nods, the subtle shifts of posture, the way a few hosts instinctively straightened their notes, as if grounding themselves in reality. Jason leaned forward even more, elbows pressing into the table, eyes locked once more on Sunny. His voice dropped, low and almost a whisper, the kind of intensity that draws in everyone present without needing to rise above it. You want consistency? He asked, tone both rhetorical and challenging. Let me ask you this. Does doing everything you can with the resources you have make you a hypocrite? Or does it make you human? Does it make you accountable, aware, and engaged with the world? Or does it just make for a good headline? The room was quiet now. Cameras recorded every nuance, capturing not just a celebrity interview, but a lesson in conviction, in presence, and in the messy complexity of real life. Jason Momoa, larger than life and yet utterly grounded, had transformed a potential confrontation into a moment of clarity, a live demonstration of authenticity under pressure. For the viewers at home, the scene was magnetic. It wasn't entertainment in the shallow sense. It was human, it was honest, it was raw. And as Jason paused, letting the silence settle like a physical weight in the room. One truth was unmistakable. Perception may shape headlines, but it cannot define the integrity of action, nor the measure of someone's commitment to the causes they hold dear. The tension in the studio was palpable now, thick enough to feel almost physical, like the kind of heat that gathers in a room when every person present senses that something consequential is about to happen. It wasn't just the glow of the studio lights or the faint hum of cameras that made the moment feel charged. It was the electricity between Jason Momoa and Sunny Host, a silent current that crackled beneath every polite smile, every deliberate movement. The air itself seemed to vibrate, as if the walls were holding their breath, and the audience, thousands of eyes glued to the action, leaned forward instinctively, sensing that they were about to witness something far beyond the usual scripted banter of daytime television. Jason shifted slightly in his chair, his broad shoulders settling into the backrest, though the energy radiating from him never dimmed. He wasn't relaxed, far from it, but there was a controlled intensity in the way he occupied his space. His hands rested lightly on his knees, thumbs tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm that mirrored the tension in the room. His jaw was tight, his gaze flicking occasionally toward Sunny, whose own posture was carefully measured. Her notes splayed out before her as though they could provide a shield against the storm she had just stirred. For the first time, it felt like neither of them were performing. Neither was adhering strictly to the expectations of their roles. The celebrity who must charm and appease, the host who must appear probing but fair. Instead, they were raw, exposed, and alive in that suspended moment. Jason's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying the half warning that had become his signature in moments like this. The kind of smile that could be comforting or dangerous, depending on how it was received. It was Whoopi Goldberg who finally intervened, her voice calm yet carrying the weight of authority that only someone with decades of experience could muster. All right, let's take a breather, people. We're live, remember?" Her words didn't just cut through the tension. They reframed it, creating a temporary pause, a space for everyone to breathe, though the energy in the room refused to dissipate entirely. Jason leaned back, still alert, still carrying the weight of that simmering intensity. The corner of his mouth twitched again, that same half warning that seemed to promise that he wasn't finished, that he had more to say, and more importantly, that he wouldn't be cornered without responding. Sunny adjusted her notes with a delicate, practiced motion, forcing a polite laugh that didn't reach her eyes. The audience, caught in the current of tension, didn't know whether to cheer, to murmur, or simply brace themselves for what came next. They could feel the anticipation coil tighter in the room, the sense that the next few moments would push Jason further than anyone had expected, that the scripted veneer of the show had cracked and something genuinely unpredictable was about to emerge. When the show cut to commercial, the tension didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. The bright studio lights dimmed just slightly, casting long, subtle shadows across the polished surfaces of the set. The hum of the audience, their chattering and shifting in their seats, filled the room like static electricity, underscoring the invisible pull between the people at the table. Jason leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, letting the brief respite from the camera's gaze wash over him. But his mind was still racing. He had been in tough interviews before, of course, moments where sharp questions and public scrutiny intersected. But there was something different this time. Something about Sunny's tone, that carefully measured undercurrent, had burrowed beneath his skin. It wasn't just the question itself. It was the implication behind it. The suggestion that his integrity, his commitment to causes he truly believed in, was merely performative. That the passion he demonstrated, the work he put into environmental advocacy, was little more than a carefully curated performance for public consumption. That stung. And it stung not just because it was unfair, but because millions of people were watching, forming opinions based on snippets, on headlines, on 30-second clips that could never capture the nuance of action and intent. Jason felt the weight of that collective gaze, the almost suffocating awareness that everything he did would be dissected, judged, and simplified into a neat, clickable story. A producer signaled discreetly from the sidelines, 30 seconds until they went live again. Jason's eyes flicked toward the audience, who had quieted now, leaning forward in their seats, sensing that the energy hadn't dissipated during the break. They could feel it, the unresolved tension, the unspoken friction that seemed to pulse through the air like a tangible current. Whoopi leaned toward him quietly, her voice low and steady, a subtle anchor amidst the storm. "You good, brother?" she asked, her tone measured but gentle, a reminder that he wasn't alone, that someone understood the stakes and the weight of the moment. Jason nodded once, forcing a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes entirely. "Yeah," he murmured, "just didn't expect that one." His words were quiet, almost intimate, but loaded with the sense that he was processing, recalibrating, preparing to respond not with deflection, but with the measured intensity that had become his hallmark. Sunny lifted her gaze from her notes, glancing at him carefully. It was a fair question, she admitted to herself, though she didn't let the doubt show. And yet, the pause between her and Jason carried the weight of everything unspoken. Ambition, scrutiny, reputation, and the genuine human desire to be understood. Every eye in the studio, every camera lens, every microphone seemed to lean forward collectively, waiting for that next spark, that next revelation. Jason's body language spoke before his words did. A subtle forward lean, the elbows pressing lightly into his knees, the slow tightening of his jaw. He was a coiled spring, focused, alert, prepared to respond not just to the surface question, but to the deeper, almost intangible challenge embedded within it. He wasn't simply defending himself, he was staking his presence, asserting his truth, making clear that while questions were fair, manipulative implications would not go unanswered. In that moment, the studio became a crucible. The lights, the polished table, the attentive audience, the hosts, and Jason, all of it fused into a scene that felt cinematic, almost surreal. It wasn't just a talk show. It was a study in tension, in presence, in the raw energy that emerges when truth meets scrutiny, and a person refuses to yield. And as the seconds ticked down, the audience's murmurs quieted, all senses primed for what would come next, an answer, a confrontation, a revelation that would echo far beyond the studio walls.